It can be both a blessing and a curse to be born along a river. The waterway is a source of beauty and nourishment, but it's also a source of power and transport for industry and commerce. But beside the Mississippi River, in St. James, is where Sharon Levine was born. St. James is home to a cluster of Black communities. The people who live here are descendants of enslaved people, people who fought and won their freedom, and sharecroppers who worked the sugarcane plantations along the banks of the Mississippi. Sharon Levine loves this place. She loves the historic St. James Catholic Church where she was baptized. It was here she worked, here that she raised her 6 kids. Sharon Levine loves St. James. And when I went to visit her, to interview her in August, I could see why. There is an old-fashioned beauty to her 20 acres property off of Highway 18. Trees line the driveway. In the back is a gazebo that her son built, and beyond that, fields she has rented to a man who said he wanted to grow soybeans. Today, Sharon Levine is fighting to preserve St. James, which is located in the 5th district of St. James Parish. This place that she says where everybody knows everybody, and if you have trouble, people will come and help you. The threat she faces is not wildfires, but the petrochemical industries that are sprawling across the sugarcane fields, inserting themselves in the residential areas, coming with huge containers to store oil and gas for the St. James port just down the road. Containers that are built flush up against the houses of the people who live there. And now, just 2 miles from Sharon Levine's house, the Taiwanese-owned Formosa Petrochemical Corporation plans to build a 14-plant plastic complex. Here, piped-in fracked gas will be converted into micro-pellets, the building block that are called nurdles. They're the building blocks of so much of the plastic products in our lives, everything from automobile parts to the single-use bags you see at our grocery store. Their conversion comes at a cost. The complex is expected to emit 13 million tons of greenhouse, which is the equivalent of 3 coal-fired plants active. I've heard it will be one of the biggest greenhouse emitters in the country. It would also emit thousands of pounds of smog, and in those pollutants are at least 5 well-known carcinogens, including formaldehyde, benzene, ethylene oxide. So what do they do to the human body? They weaken it, make it more susceptible to cancer. Formosa would be coming to a place already unduly burdened with industrial pollution. Jamestown is located in the 5th district of St. James Parish, which is located in the middle of the chemical corridor. It's an 85-mile stretch between Baton Rouge and Louisiana along the Mississippi River. And here there are between 100 and 140 oil refineries and petrochemical industries. The area is popularly known as Cancer Alley or Death Alley because the cancer rates are 50 times the national average. 2 years ago, Sharon Levine, a devout Catholic, a recently retired school teacher, founded Rise St. James, a grassroots faith-based group which is fighting the construction of Formosa and her beloved St. James. It is a David, or in this case, Davidina struggle, and Goliath struggle, for the odds against Sharon Levine are enormous. Louisiana has historically been pro-industry. State and local governments are so eager to have Formosa, a multi-billion-dollar multinational, that they gave it $1.4 billion in incentives, most of these property tax write-offs, grandfathering a law that would allow those write-offs to continue for 10 years, not 5, which is what the current requirement is. The governor was enthusiastic when the deal was made. He said that Formosa would bring 1,200 jobs, paying $87,000, which is no small chunk of change in South Louisiana, and bring 8,000 construction jobs at its peak. St. James Parish Council was equally enthusiastic. They voted to let the company build. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers granted permits for the wetlands altering that's going to have to happen. And the Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality, which some have called a permitting agency, not a regulating agency, said the emissions would be fine. St. James is approximately 50% black and 50% white, the population of the parish. But the 5th district where Ms. Levine lives is 90% black, and its median income is about $30,000. And while you will see some very nice homes there, and some very poor ones, this district, population 2,500, is not a place where the rich and powerful live. In 2014, without public input, the St. James Parish Council changed the land use plan for the 5th district and the 4th, which is about 60% black. They changed the land use plan from residential to residential future industrial. It was, in effect, a demapping of these communities, a willingness to say that this place where human beings, live oak, Spanish moss, sugarcane grow, will now be replaced with pipelines, belching smokestacks, enormous storage sites for oil and gas, rail lines, highways, trucks, trains. With that change in designation, new industries moved into the 5th district and old ones expanded. So this is the tedium of environmental racism, how it works quietly, devastatingly. And for anyone who's worked in economic development or commerce, it is a truth that sacrifice is part of the story. The reality is not static, and it's no avoiding that professions and jobs are lost. But the sacrifice here is never evenly shared, because the same parish council that changed the zoning for the 5th district prevented 2 industries from entering the 3rd district, which is 80% white, which means the property owners there don't have to worry about devaluation, which means the parents don't have to worry as much about the air that their children breathe. Sharon Levine said that when she learned Formosa was coming to town, she felt despair and disgust. How could the political leaders do this to them? The 5th district, which was already overburdened with 12 petrochemical facilities. Many in the community were resigned to their fate. The parish council had voted, it was a done deal. And this defeatism troubled Ms. Levine. One tearful afternoon, she sat on her porch and prayed very hard. What do you want me to do, Lord? What do you want me to do? And she heard God say very clearly, she asked God, she said, do you want me to sell, to leave? And she heard God say very clearly, fight. So that is what she has been doing with Rise St. James. Joined by environmental attorneys, climate scientists, and tireless allies like Ann Ross of Louisiana Bucket Brigade and Lutheran pastor Greg Manning. They've held marches along Cancer Alley, once a 10-day procession in which Reverend William Barber of the Poor People's Campaign attended. They've demonstrated in the corridor outside a meeting room of the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry. Sharon Levine and members of Rise St. James gathered on the steps of the State House, prayed and sang hymns while awaiting Governor John Bell Edwards' decision on a Louisiana bill that would have made protesting near critical infrastructure. And what is critical infrastructure in the state of Louisiana? The petrochemical industries. Would have made trespassing a crime of in which you would be sentenced for 5 years and possibly hard labor. Thank God Edwards vetoed the bill. After independent archaeologists contracted by Formosa identified burial sites of enslaved people on the property, Rise St. James and allies convinced a judge to place a stay of construction so they could hold their Juneteenth celebration on the acreage, and a Catholic priest, Father Dufresne, offered prayers for the dead. A self-described shy woman who knew nothing about Facebook, she told me, Sharon Levine has spoken at a committee hearing before the U.S. Congress and at universities. These days, she's often on Facebook posting live from St. James, calling out Formosa for a violation, beseeching public officials to rescind their permit for the company and not let it poison the people of St. James. Attorneys with Earth Justice and the Center for Constitutional Rights are challenging the permits that were granted by the U.S. Corps of Engineers and the LDEQ. This month, the activists are speaking out against a bill that grants those industrial tax exemptions. At a recent session, Rise St. James brought a new ally into the conversation, a catfisherman, a restaurateur, who explained to the councilmen and women how runoff water from this new plant would ruin the ecosystem of the lake where he fishes and affect not only the fisher people, but the restaurateurs downriver who were selling his catfish in New Orleans. It was an important point because the governor had said jobs would come to Louisiana with Formosa, but they would also go. Sharon Levine and her allies have made such a stink that climate activists in Southeast Asia are aware of the struggle along the Mississippi. In June, about 10 or 12 of them stood outside the annual stockholders meeting in Taipei, Taiwan, holding photos of Sharon, her brother, and other people from that southern black community on the banks of the Mississippi. Ask Sharon Levine and she will tell you why Formosa is not a good neighbor, for she knows about the huge spill in Vietnam, where a Formosa steel plant contaminated 125 miles of coastline, devastating fisheries and tourist people. 40,000 the livelihood. So again, jobs gained, but also jobs lost. The bishop of the diocese, Bishop Paul Nguyen Thai Hoc, had spoken out vigorously about Formosa's malfeasance, its slowness to compensate. If you look him up online, you'll see him, collared cleric, sitting in front of the headquarters in Taipei, thumbs down to the company. The South is a praying place, an overtly religious region. References to God, the good Lord, are part of speech, and it's not uncommon for ministers to pray openly at a climate rally or a press conference, to open a climate rally or press conference with prayer. Even the tattooed youth with the punky haircut, the climate activist, can be seen nodding her head and saying, "Yes, Lord." So when a friend urged Sharon Levine to do a Jericho wall prayer at the Formosa construction site, she did. Accompanied by 3 Protestant pastors, she hiked the levee and looked out at the lush acreage of sugarcane fields and wetlands where the mega-plastic complex plans to build. Recalling the miracle of the Israelite Joshua at the ancient city of Jericho, how he walked 6 times around the city and on the 7th blew the trumpet until the walls came tumbling down. Remembering all this, Sharon and her little group walked atop the embankment 6 times in a circle, reciting the 23rd Psalm, and on the 7th, raised their arms skyward and begged God Almighty to stop Formosa. Ever since I've heard that story, the image of 4 Black Americans standing on a levee beside the Mississippi in an area chock full of industry, their arms raised skyward, begging God, no more. It stayed with me. We are here, they seem to be saying. It brought to mind the Dr. Seuss story of Horton Hears a Who, the tale of an attentive elephant who preserves a speck of dust because he knows it is home to the residents of Whoville, an entire city. He can hear them saying, "We are here, we are here." There's so many people around the globe right now feeling the crush of relentless consumerism and an economic system that is separated from consideration of planetary health and human well-being, who are saying, "We are here, we are here." Yet I do not want you to think Sharon Levine and all those activists in southern Louisiana are poor victims. They are the wise ones, the guiding lights, speaking up for themselves, their community, but also for the river, the iconic Mississippi, so magnificent, so essential. I know these are hard times in the country. Everyone talks about how divided we are. But if you go south, you will see acute racism. You will see refugees from storms who are displaced. Lake St. Charles people, 5,000 in New Orleans had come over to New Orleans while I was there. But you will see Americans of every hue and background, the highly educated and those educated by life, fighting to preserve ecosystems and human habitat. Down in St. James Parish, you can see in real time, in living form, what Pope Francis describes in the opening chapter of Laudate Si. You can see, quote, what the Pope says, the degree of human intervention, often in the service of business interests and consumerism, how it's actually making our earth less rich and beautiful, ever more limited and gray. But you can also see an enfleshment of some of the solutions the Pope proposes. The need to, quote, have an awareness of our common origin, of our mutual belonging, and a future to be shared with everyone. That awareness, I think, is growing by necessity down along the banks of the Mississippi River. In closing, I just want to read a short speech that Sharon Levine gave at the Tulane Environmental Law Conference, and then, if it's all right, give you 2 action steps. There always have to be action steps in my world. I was born in St. James Parish when Jim Crow still ruled. Racist laws made sure that many Black Louisianans were unable to participate in democracy. It's been more than 50 years since the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, but the proposed Formosa plastic plant shows that democracy has not fully come to St. James. If my community had a say, Louisiana would not be spending $1.5 billion to attract a foreign polluter. If my community had a say, we would not allow a plastics-producing plant to bulldoze 3.5 square miles of wetlands and sugarcane fields. Formosa has a terrible track record as far as treating workers, their safety, and our environment. But nobody ever asked us. We were not informed when in 2014 the northern part of the 5th District, my home, was zoned for industrial use. Before industry took over my parish, we had clean air and productive land. My grandfather caught fish and shrimp in the Mississippi River. Our fig and pecan trees kept us well fed and even provided enough for us to sell. It was peaceful and quiet. Now the land and everything that grows on it is poisoned. Now our houses are flooding when there's rain. The Civil Rights Act and the Louisiana Constitution are supposed to protect Black communities from this type of environmental racism. They have not in Cancer Alley. Our agencies are rubber stamping every permit that comes across their desk. When we call the Department of Environmental Quality about its terrible smell in the air, they come out 3 days later and tell us that they don't smell anything. Year after year, our Louisiana legislators have rejected demands for air monitors at industrial sites with a history of air permit violations. From the moment I heard about Formosa, I was told it was a done deal. The government had yet to issue any permits, but the state was already celebrating the announcement of the project. What they are actually celebrating is not just poisoning our air and drinking water, but also the air and water for residents of Blucher, La Place, Metairie, and New Orleans, all of which are down the river. Air and water do not stop at the parish line. At several parish-level hearings, every local resident who spoke out against the plant. They describe how their children have trouble breathing, how they have to deal with skin rashes, nosebleeds, respiratory ailments, cancer. They pleaded with the council not to permit yet another humongous toxic plant. The plant supporters seem to be all Taiwanese executives and wealthy businessmen who live safely outside Cancer Alley. The parish voted to approve the project anyway. This is our land, this is our home, and we're standing up together to defend it. St. James is rising. So action. Think about the plastic. We're coming into Christmas. Think about your use of it. It doesn't come for free. Its production contaminates human beings. The spill of those micropellets really contaminate our waterways. So think about your plastics and try to migrate away from them. Second action. There is effort at a legislative level by Senator Tom Udall of New Mexico and also Alan Lowenthal, Representative Democrat, asking that the companies that produce the plastic pay for their reuse and recycling. So check it out. It's a beginning of a movement to really look at the inundation of this material that we all have come to use, but we cannot anymore. We must change. Thank you so much.